Alrighty, well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And we welcome back to the program on our All Things Canada edition, our Make Me Wanna Holler, which covers the plight of Black people across Turtle Island, Britain, and elsewhere. And of course, we're going to be returning to all things radical reform or abolishing of the police. So we are rejoined by Desmond Cole, who is a Black Canadian leftist journalist, social and racial justice activist, and an advocate of abolishing the police. And let's get into it. But first off, Desmond, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's a real honor to have you back on.
Thanks for having me back, Yuri. It's nice to see you.
Likewise. And my first question I wanted to ask you, Desmond, is before we talk about the police and abolishing them, is you've been participating in a lot of the historic popular mass mobilization of Palestine Solidarity in Canada. And can you please talk to us about them? And then I have a follow up question is: do you think that many of the people engaging in these solidarity protests will be converted to join full time or part time the anti-imperialist movement, which is so badly needed in Canada and is in dire need of advancing?
I love the second part of the question, and so make sure I come back to that because I really want to talk about that actually, and how
Okay.
how we um preserve the momentum that's been built right now, I guess, and keep people who have become interested in these movements because of Palestine, keep them around, keep them educating themselves and collecting connecting to other struggles, right? Um so after the October 7th attack by Hamas, it was like very, very clear what Canada's position as a government was going to be. No surprises. Just full bore behind Israel, complete uh, justification and, um, authorization on the part of our government. Not that Canada has to authorize Israel to do something, but we were giving our blessing to whatever response that the Israeli government under Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to take. And things have really changed in the last 6 months plus, I would say, because the unbelievable violence in Gaza, uh, this horrific siege, and the way that it's been able to be broadcast around the world, right? Even without full electricity in that part of the world, even with people running for their lives, limited resources, limited fuel, everyone under attack and fleeing, they have still managed to get their messages out to the world. And I must say also, even despite Israel not allowing journalists into Gaza and the US media and the Western media, taking their sourcing directly from the people doing the aggressing, right? Even despite all of those odds, somehow the world has been able to see with our own eyes what's been happening. And things have really changed in Canada. Um, I was very front and center when uh, I had a front row seat, I should say, when Sarah Jama was kicked out of the Ontario legislature here for calling for a ceasefire. She was the first Canadian politician that I know of who went on the record to say that, and she's paid a huge price for it in terms of subsequently being forced out of the Ontario New Democratic Party and being censured by the entire Ontario legislature. Um, I was literally in the gallery when they took the vote to censure her. It was just a disgraceful moment, but Sarah is still here, and the leadership that I think she demonstrated as a Black woman who's been a long time supporter of Palestine and Palestinian solidarity, um, her leadership has proven to really have forecast the way that the country was going to go. So, um, all the politicians here really rallied behind Israel for several months until I think the movement really started to churn its wheels to say no, to not just call for a ceasefire, but to call for a two-way arms embargo between Canada and Israel. And that's been an increasingly powerful claim that a lot of people think should be happening. And opinion in Canada is decidedly against this ongoing siege. Like the majority of Canadians want it to end. I don't know what the polls would say. I'm not a big polling person, but public opinion does matter. And especially on this subject where I don't know when in my lifetime you could say the majority of people have been so strongly behind Palestine. Um, it matters that people have been going out into the streets week after week after week. This entire time, people have been blockading railways, going to arms partners of the state of Israel and blockading them, writing letters, um, going and harassing politicians everywhere that they go in this country, Justin Trudeau and his cabinet members, and saying you will have no peace until you stop supporting this nonsense.
Yeah.
Um, it has dramatically shifted the tide. And then we get to the second part of your question, right? Which is then how do we then um, plug that in to bigger anti-imperial struggles? And I think that the answer where I'm sitting is, I love to talk about the police. I don't love it, but it's necessary. And that's my that's
Well, unfortunately, it is something that affects our people. It is something that affects lots of other people who luckily in Canada you're in solidarity with. Look, it's a big issue, the state terrorism that the police inflicts on us.
but
And and I never thought in my lifetime, I'll just say this before you go back to answering the question.
sure.
Just never thought in my lifetime that we would that people would be demanding radical reforms of the police. Yes, I think that was always in the cards. But the idea of actually abolishing the police and saying to people, actually, there's other ways we can end violence and so forth and deal with the problems. Never. I mean, I never thought doing 1+1, I would be having that it would be a theme that I would be constantly returning to. So, anyhow.
I don't think that in my earlier years of work I even thought it was possible. I didn't think of it as an option. But for me, that is the one of 1,000 different ways to try and connect the struggle. And so what I mean by that is I talk about these demonstrations that are happening, hundreds of, if not, countless numbers of demonstrations that have been happening all over the country in the last 6+ months. They have been met with a tremendous amount of police repression.
Yeah.
So I remember the police in, I think, Calgary charging a man with hate speech for saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Uh, they dropped that charge, of course, because we're not all the way to the totalitarian state that some people here want yet. But, you know, they arrest people at demonstrations, and after the police assault them, they charge them with having assaulted the police. Police will film people and to try and intimidate them. They will go on the news and say, we need more money because these demonstrations are out of control. No one needs the demonstrations to be policed, of course, and nothing bad ever happens unless the police engage and show up. But this has been a tool for the police to try and argue that someone is being made unsafe by, expressions of Palestinian love and solidarity and wanting this violence to end. And so we have to be there to mediate. And for me, I'm trying to draw the connections to people to say any struggle that we engage in for our labor rights, any struggle that we engage in for the underclass, for poor people, for unhoused people, for people who are living on disability. Ultimately, we are going to be met by the police. And so some of the folks in the Palestinian organizing, um, I think they've been surprised at the level of police repression, right? But those of us who have been doing this work for a long time, we are not surprised. We expect that anytime people speak out forcefully against the state, this is what's going to happen. So I am trying in my way to say, if you understand, how bad things are in terms of the police silencing your dissent for Palestine, you've got to recognize that the state is always going to use violence when you get too loud, and actually taking away the state's ability to crush our dissent, to crush our righteous fight for ourselves. That's where we need to be. And then you tie that into the bigger picture, internationally speaking, with the way that the Canadian military is helping Israel, with the way that the Canadian military, in its own way, has influenced what's happening in Haiti right now, has influenced what's happening in so many other parts of the world and contributed to so much suffering. Um, the forces that we are fighting against use violence and intimidation as a means of control. So whether that's your local pro-Palestine demonstration, or whether that is an anti-war or anti-poverty fight, whatever the case may be, um, it's the same forces that we have to contend with when we try to take our power back.
So are you optimistic then that with these very popular Palestine Solidarity protests, and thank God that they are so popular, so massive. I mean, to see to see record levels of Jewish anti-Zionists making their voices loud and clear and not in our name, to see so many people of the Palestine diaspora and the broader West Asia, Middle East diaspora, to see and to see so many indigenous people in New Zealand, in Australia, in the United States, and in Canada, coming out in record levels. Also, showing solidarity to the Palestinians, which to me I find quite beautiful, because you get that sea of humanity, then you get that solidarity, then you get that coalition buildings. But are you optimistic that for people like me, Eve Angler, and others who are involved in the anti-imperialist movement, like maybe we'll finally get these people to to know that, like, hey, if you think Canada is bad in Palestine, wait until you see Canada in Africa, Eastern Europe, Haiti, the Americas, and so forth. And that's, yeah, Canada's brutal settler colonial regime at home, and it's pro mining and corporatism. Canada does that on steroids overseas, and and of course, the military is the police on steroids overseas.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
am
I'm
am I
curious.
optimistic? I mean, I feel like in a way, I am very optimistic because, as I said, I've never seen anything like this before in my lifetime, in my adult lifetime, like that I've been paying attention. I know that the organizing to end apartheid in South Africa, which is also very tied to this issue, was tremendous, but I was quite young, and so I don't remember those things. Um, but for me, this has been a kind of this is a moment that we can't go back from. So I think a lot of people's consciousnesses are going to be changed. And for example, like, we'll get into this later, but I didn't really sleep last night. I was out at 3:30 in the morning, 4 in the morning, when U of T students started a camp in the middle of that campus downtown in Toronto, a camp saying, like, we've tried everything to get to this administration at our school and to get them to divest from companies that support the state of Israel. They're not listening to us. We've done teach-ins, we've done meetings with the administration, we've done everything, and they don't listen. They don't listen to open letters. So now here we are. We're going to take up some space, and I'm going to make our demonstration more visible. And it's beautiful to see all of these things happening. But you know, I am optimistic because I don't think we're going to go backwards. And I think that when we look at the United States and all of the horrific repression that is happening to students right now, they're not going to forget that. That's going to mark them. They are being radicalized. They are being radicalized right now by someone telling them your call for peace and justice is violent and anti-Semitic and it has to be crushed. Not that we disagree with you, but you have to be crushed. You have to be arrested. I hope that doesn't happen in Canada. It's not happening at that scale yet.
Yeah.
However, I was here, and this is why I talk about connecting to other issues. When we had mass encampments for COVID, you know, uh, in 2021 in particular, and people just lose their jobs, people are out of work and they're sleeping outdoors. Our mayor decided that he was going to absolutely crush those encampments and move out people who literally had nowhere to go. Like the shelters have been at capacity for years already in Toronto. And now you have this global pandemic, this crisis. And it's like, yeah, we have a global pandemic, but I still don't want to see you suffering. So get out. And I feel like it's only a matter of time before the Toronto police, who have been awful in the last 6 months, take their opportunity to try and get after these students. We saw at McGill that they've been trying in Montreal. They tried to seek an injunction against the students. It failed. But since the injunction failed, there's been a dramatic increase in police presence. And again, the police aren't there doing anything. They're not there responding to anything. They're there to instigate. They're there to telegraph to the public that something is wrong and that we're about to fix it. But they are, of course, they are the violence that they seek to critique and address. It's their violence, the police's violence. And so I am worried as we go along that the students here are going to have to face that. I don't want them to have to face that. But this again is the reality of standing up, is that ultimately when the government is tired of hearing you and it doesn't want to do what you're asking, it's going to turn the tables and get violent. And so we need to support the students who are going out here and being so courageous. And that's why I was up at 3:30 this morning. I didn't sleep last night. And I'm here talking to you on very low fuel, but I feel energized
hard,
nevertheless.
hard hardly noticeable, Desmond, and we and you know we really do thank you for your service. So that's a perfect segue then to this question, which is I'm curious, you know, with all the popular supports for Palestine and this huge awakening for many people that Canada is not an honest actor, mediator, or broker internationally, where's Black Lives Matter in these historic times, and the Black left organizations movements you roll with, and do you see your movements for abolishing the police uh, riding on this momentum in expanding that to abolishing the Canadian military, CICIS, the Secret Service, deep state, which are the police on steroids?
So, um, this is an interesting question because I actually think that historically and right now, it's Black student groups who have actually led the charge in Canada, the anti-imperialist charge, when we're talking about Black organizing. It's mainly Black students who are doing that work on campuses. But
Interesting.
L. Jones, who you know and who you've interviewed and a good homie of mine,
Yeah.
um, Elle made a very important point recently, and I think she paid the price for it, which I'll explain. But Elle was tweeting about how actually not only is it hard to find a major Black Canadian institution that is um, actively and loudly supporting Palestine right now, they're all actually very sympathetic to a kind of Zionist and pro-Israel institutional power. And so you actually see groups like, and now the groups I'm about to name, I don't blame anybody who's even in my country who's like, who is that? Because they're not trying to have a public profile. But like, let's take like the Federation of Black Canadians, who I've written about extensively over many years, or the Black North Initiative, or what have we got? The Black Business Professionals Association, or Operation Black Vote, or all of these. And by the way, these are all the same people who are like running all the organizations I'm talking about. Canada's a small place,
Yeah.
and its institutional Black power is really concentrated, right? But these folks don't want to say anything about what's happening right now. They are actually partnering with groups like the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, or CIJA. They're partnering. Yeah, I feel like you do. I give that a thumbs down also. B'nai B'rith Canada, Friends of Simon Wiesenthal
Oh my
Center. That's
God.
that's who
Today, Chris.
institutional Black Canada is aligned with. And L. Jones made this point in a series of tweets recently, being like, you're not actually going to see our Black major organizations, particularly if they get government funding. You're not going to see them out here saying free Palestine and calling for a ceasefire. If anything, they're going to remain quiet, or they're going to run cover for the violence that's happening. And Elle said that, and it got a lot of attention. And then she was scheduled to go to the Supreme Court with a delegation led by, former Governor General Michael Jean of the Michael Jean Foundation. And they gave a call to Michael Jean right before this Supreme Court visit, where they're going to talk about anti-Black racism. And they said 3 people, including L. Jones, are no longer invited to come here. They're no longer invited to come to the Supreme Court of Canada because they have made tweets that have made the clerks here feel unsafe. They wouldn't tell Michael Jean what the tweets were. And it seems actually that they were just referring to L's thread about the complicity between Black organizations and pro-Israel, pro-Israeli apartheid organizations. And for that, she was disinvited because somebody who had power in that building was like, nah, we got to punish you for saying this. So I think L's point is really important. Um, Black people who are climbers, I will call them in this country, who want to climb up the institutional power ladder, they have learned how to either keep their mouths shut when it comes to Israel Palestine, or actually just to completely run cover, as I was saying. And so I have to shout out Black students at McGill, Black students at University of Toronto, at UBC. Honestly, it's been years that groups like that have been taking the hit in the complete absence of leadership of like more formal institutional Black orgs.
Say, je suis Sarah John and je suis Tay L. Jones. So,
Well,
but
it's like Sarah
yeah.
Sarah people are acting like Sarah Jama is new to this issue of Palestine. I met Sarah on campus at McMaster years ago, and she was doing this exact same kind of work. It's been years that Sarah has been outspoken. Sarah Jama turned 30 this year, by the way, Youri. So like
Wow. Wow. Okay.
this is what it is that like the
Nice.
younger people in like Black organized circles, they are taking risks that the more established folks are not taking. And I do think it is going to take larger multiracial coalitions to get to what you're talking about, to get to a point where we can actually challenge Canadian foreign policy, where we can actually challenge Canadian domestic policy. I just watched a fabulous film called Yinta, which is about the Wet'suwet'en people in British Columbia who have been trying to defend their land from coastal gas link pipelines. This film was a decade plus in the making, and I know one of the filmmakers, Michael Toledano. It is just superb. Maybe it'll come out your way in a film festival or something because it's just been debuted out here. It's a
Wow.
wonderful film.
I would love to see it, and I'll even ask you a question because I was actually just thinking about like the Wet'suwet'en and the people. I thought to myself, nah, save that question for another time. But okay, but yes,
Yeah, just to finish though, really quickly, I just wanted to say that like when you watch a film like that, you see what Canada is willing to do domestically to Indigenous peoples who want to defend land and water from fossil fuel development. and and so making that connection to what you're talking about, Canadian overseas mining practices, groups like Misson here in Canada, like it's a slow, steady kind of work. And I think sometimes actually it is what's happening with Palestine right now is more unique to me because it is a lot easier to me to make that connection at home than it is to make it overseas. But again, the reason people are able to make it overseas is because I mean, I open Twitter every day and there are just pictures of bodies. There are pictures of children's bodies under the rubble in Gaza. There are pictures of children who have limbs who have been blown off. It, I can't look at that stuff. It bothers me so much. But even though we're not there, even though we're as far away from there as we could possibly be, people see that. And the filmmaking of like the movie Yinta is so important because Canada is also a very big country. And we don't see always what's happening in a place like British Columbia or what's happening in Alberta with oil and gas development. We don't always see those things. And so, however, we bring those struggles to people's attention, that's how I think we build the kind of broader momentum that you're talking about and start making the connections.
Well, interesting, and you know, you were saying that it has to be multi racial and so forth, and I have a feeling that it is going to happen in Canada as because because already with Black Lives, well, already when it comes to police brutality and defunding the police and abolishing the police or just radically reforming the police, there was already like a lot of like coalition building that was going on the sort of between the Black Lives Matter movement in Canada and the Native Lives Matter movement, which I thought was, you know, brilliant. And then you see a lot in the 2S LGBTQIA plus circles, the queer liberationist movement. You see a lot of them also, you know, making the effort to show solidarity to Indigenous people and trying to bring different racial groups of queer backgrounds and their straight allies together. So I have a feeling I have a feeling that well, yeah, I think the anti-imperialist movement will advance in Canada. But it's just but you know, it takes time because you know people have to unlearn a lot of things about Canada.
If I can just add one thing really quickly
Sure.
though, BLM, Black Lives Matter, has become part of this institutional Black power that I'm critiquing. The Black
Yeah,
Lives Matter
yeah.
movement is
Yeah, exactly. I believe you were also, yeah, you've expressed that that you've not liked the direction they've gone to, and Al Jones has
for
also
several, yeah, for several years now, because I mean, if we're talking about BLM in the United States, they, on principle, when they formed as an organization, said that they would never align themselves with a political party. They are a wing of the Democratic Party now. They just are. That's not, I think, an opinion of mine. I think that that's empirically true based on the work that they're doing now. But they told their membership that that's not who they were going to be. Um, so people don't like the
they
term
don't even
selling out.
and they're not and they don't even endorse like the most like radical like politician like a Bernie Sanders, like Alicia Garza endorsed like you know like Elizabeth Warren, and now it's
Yeah, but as an organization, they are very focused on how do we cozy up to the Democratic Party and kind of run alongside of them. And that's not who they were meant to be. In Toronto, the incredible Black Lives Matter movement that I have documented in my work for many years now, you don't hear from them, Youri. No one's calling them to be like, okay, so solidarity, you guys have done all this solidarity work. What are you thinking about what's happening in Palestine? No one's hearing from them because they got a bag. Okay. They got some money. They got a lot of money from the United States, folks, and they bought a big fancy building in Toronto. And they've basically divested from activism now. They're like, we're artists now. Now we are storytellers. And now we run consultations for people. But that hard work that I just went and documented this morning in the streets of Toronto, they're not directly connected to that anymore. And so the struggle continues because um, the idea of BLM was phenomenal and timely when it happened. It was necessary when it happened. But we need something else now because the powers that be have figured out a way not just to co-opt BLM, but to co-opt the entire kind of 2020 George Floyd uprising for Black life that has all been reabsorbed with fucking Instagram Black squares and DEI and all of this nonsense that
Well, in fact, yeah, in fact, and it went from, and I've talked about this before with both Al and Margaret Kimberly. Like, as much like I do believe that, like, impoverished Black communities do need a lot of investment, stuff like that. So I don't reject that at all. But that's not what we. That's not why people. That's not why masses of people were in the streets in across Turtle Island, New Zealand, Australia, France, Germany, Britain, and so forth. That's not why people were in the streets. It was in solidarity for this man who was murdered, and it was
thank you.
out against institutional racism and state terrorism, police brutality, and so forth. And we went from like arguing about we went from decrying that to this bizarre thing where it's like, whoa, what we need is more Black businesses, and we need to invest in, like,
Right.
the Black community. And once you poor Black people become middle class or upper middle class, then don't worry, the police aren't gonna murder you. And it's like, what?
I'm so grateful. You're like some of my gray hairs are turning back black now as you speak. Like, thank you, because like I went to an event at University of Windsor, I think in February, and I talked about this because I'm not against, say, a university having stronger diversity and equity policy. I'm not against them trying to address some of the historical wrongs of the institution. But I'm interested in anti-racism more than I am diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion frames these things as fait accompli, right? As things that we already all agree on and just need to now implement in order to make a better world. When really what we're talking about is anti-racism, anti-imperialism. We're talking about the feminist struggle. We're talking about decolonial struggle. We're not just naming the nice things that everybody wants to have. We're naming the entrenched systemic problems that still exist. And so, yeah, you don't see DEI organizations being like, no more cops on campus, which again is kind of relevant now that all of these students are going onto campus and they're being met by campus security and the police, right? George Floyd didn't die so that people could get a job in the academic institution. That's not what the struggle was about. And it's been co opted, it's been very cleverly co opted. And so we need a new vehicle now. And I will always treasure the real work that came out of the BLM movement, the incredible work. It's over now, though. We have to move on because, um, and it's also a case study in, leadership becoming the movement, in the idea that, you mentioned Garza, but also, Patrice Cullors and other like soaring figures of that movement becoming bigger than the movement itself. And it's a cautionary tale that when that happens, and when those people start doing, five-figure speaking gigs and getting an outsized kind of attention that takes away from the movement, there's something wrong. And I'm going to say this too, Youri, like, I have been incredibly blessed in my own country. I am a best-selling author. I get asked to be on television. So maybe it seems hypocritical of me to be calling out these other folks. But I am still trying to commit myself to the work and to the grassroots. And I feel like all of us
to
have
the
to
radical
always,
and to the radical demands.
well, and to the radical demands that I think we have to continue making, because like we live in an individualist society. So it's easier for one person to get attention focused on an issue often than it is for collectives of people too, because of the way we tell stories. We like to tell stories about individual triumph, individual overcoming adversity, and all of these kinds of things. So they fit nicely into the mold for the media. But we also just have to be conscious of that, and we have to reject it whenever we can. We have to hand the mic over to people who don't have those opportunities as much as we can. And we have to build collectives. Because do you know something? It's easy to brush a couple hundred students off of a campus. When there are tens of thousands of people in the street, I don't see nothing about no police. I don't even hear about the police. That's the day that we're building towards.
Wow, and it sounds to me as if you're sort of saying to people, guys, don't be afraid, come on out, show
Well,
some
we got to
solidarity.
bring them out, and we got to give them a reason. We can't think that it's self-evident and that it's so obvious why they have to be out. And by the way, demonstrating in the street is not it's not the be all and end all either. The people who have been writing letters to their politicians, showing up to events and saying, "Why aren't you doing something right now for Gaza?" These guys don't sleep at night, man. They lie in bed, and I'm sure before they fall asleep, they think about the mean things that people said to them that day, and it works on their mind. Um, Letter writing campaigns, showing up to events, um, telling people who call you for a fundraising call for a political party, I will never support you as long as you're doing this. Even just talking in your social groups, like where do we have the most influence? Is it in the street? Sometimes we have the most influence just with like our family,
Yeah,
with our friends, our work colleagues, and being courageous enough and learning the skills to have conversations that maybe aren't being had. I think that's the number one way that we all influence. So getting out in the street is awesome. One day when we have built up that capacity, it will be more self-evident that we got to go out there. It will be, but we have to build the blocks.
interesting. And actually, I wasn't planning on asking this question, but I do have to ask this as a follow up question, which is how is the black community in Quebec? Would you say that they're distinct from the rest of Canada, Anglophone Canada, or not, or not so, or not so much? Because I know even many people, have often said to me that like Quebec is really where like a lot of like great like activism on anything and everything happens. So I'm curious if the black community in Quebec has been more, sort of like on the front line when it comes to not just what's going on in Palestine, but also trying to explain to people that it's not just Palestine where our governments are you know inflicts evil on, but it's also Haiti, it's also the continents of Africa, Latin America, and so forth. So I'm curious your response on that.
Um, e- e- Everything about Quebec is distinct.
Yeah.
Like literally, it's such an interesting and contradictory in many ways place, right? Um, the the black struggle in Quebec, I think some of the specificities with it involve the particular diaspora that have found themselves in Quebec. So you've mentioned Haiti a lot. That's who's in Quebec. It is folks who uh, have created very large communities in like places like Montreal North, who are Haitian asylum seekers, immigrants, refugees over many, many decades, right? Who have not had a safe home to go back to and have made a new home in Canada, many of whom have faced deportation at the hands of this government, who, as I've written many times about, only wants temporary black immigrants, right? We want you to come and hang out for a little while, do some work for us, work on the farm for a season, work in the healthcare sector for a little bit, and then get lost. You know, this has been the trend. Black deportation dwarfs the way that other communities are targeted for the state, like for like these visible forms of like, you don't belong here, we can remove you anytime we want to. And so I feel like that has shaped a lot of the advocacy and activism within black people in Quebec. Youri, the premier of Quebec, Francois Legault,
Yeah,
he, at the beginning of COVID, he was praising Black Haitian immigrants. He called them guardian angels because there were so many people in the years preceding COVID who had come across the border from New York into Quebec seeking asylum. And there was a lot of like immediate racism. We don't want these people here. And then COVID came, and all of these folks, like thousands of them, went into healthcare. They were the ones cleaning up in the hospitals. They were the ones doing a lot of the most dangerous work at the beginning of this pandemic. And then they were guardian angels. But then when people said, so you're going to make them citizens, right? You're going to give them a pathway to remain in Canada. Oh, no, no, we could never do that. So we'll create a program, and the program will allow you to apply for a pathway to citizenship, but only if you have a direct contact with people who had COVID. So if you were nursing people who had COVID, you can apply to potentially qualify for a potential pathway to citizenship. But if you were just sweeping the floor as a Black Haitian person, you're not guardian angel enough. And he showed his ass, right? And that fueled a very particular kind of backlash and public awareness among Black Haitian people in Quebec, whose fight has been really rad and really powerful. There are, related to this, there are a lot of Black people in immigration detention in Quebec because of the number of Black asylum seekers who end up there. The irony of this is that Quebec can't even sustain its population without immigration. They're so desperate for French speaking people to come and, preserve their heritage, as they would tell us, but they don't want Black people to come and do that, right? I mean, I wonder why. So you
oh
see
God.
this like mass movement also in Quebec around immigration detention and trying to snatch people away from the hands of the state. Um, in that regard. And no one needs to tell Haiti about, or sorry, to tell Haitians about an anti-imperialist struggle. Like, they're telling us, they know, right? So again, to the extent that we can support and connect those struggles, and I mentioned migrant farm workers as well, that's more of an Ontario thing, but these are the struggles that I think connect the local to the international for like Black people in this part of the world.
Interesting. And then I have to ask this question, which is this is a question I asked I asked Elle when she was here over the weekend. So I'm curious your response, which is how does the Black Canadian community across the country usually vote? Do they tend to vote liberal or NDP? And if not the NDP, and if it's liberal, why is that? And do you think that the conservatives will have a huge comeback should another general federal election come? And why do you think yes, or why do you have hope that they won't make a comeback?
These are great questions, and they remain only questions in Canada because no one keeps any data about who does what in this country when it comes to race. Uh, the bane of my existence as a journalist reporting on Black issues is that unlike the United States of America, where you have desegregated data about all kinds of things, we just refuse to keep that information in Canada because if you don't document it, then it doesn't exist, right? If you can't point to any numbers, then there's no problem. And so I can't tell you
And that's
how
how and that's how you'll have politicians, whether they be liberal or conservative, they can say stupid things like there is no racism in Canada, there is
they
no
can say they
there
they
is
can
there
say
is there is
whatever.
no unique anti-black racism in Canada. That's all a U.S. thing.
Well, that's it. That's the 1-2 punch. The 1-2 punch is look at the shiny object over there in America. Don't worry about what we're doing here. And besides, there's no evidence of what we're doing here because we refuse to collect it. So there isn't really strong exit polling about how Black people have been voting in this country for the last 40 years. There isn't strong information about who belongs to political parties and why or what the trends are. I would I can only speak anecdotally, so I'll say a few things. First of all, I think that it's kind of a truism and a bit of a stereotype, but my parents' generation, baby boomers who came to this country as immigrants, I think they really liked Daddy Trudeau, yeah, Pierre Elliott. And so
Shouldn't,
because
but that's another topic for another day.
that we won't go there today, okay? Because that's a whole nother next like 3 hour podcast. But like, you know, Pierre Elliott Trudeau made immigration more possible for a lot of people like my parents. And I have to say, things like family reunification when my parents came to Canada in the 70s was a lot more possible and easy to do than it is now. And so they remember that. Like
Wow.
I got to live with both of my grandmothers growing up, Yuri, because it was very easy for my parents from Sierra Leone to sponsor them to come here. So I had this wonderful, rich experience of being taken care of by both of my grandmothers, like getting to hang out with them and grow up with them in this country. And that was as a result of, I would say, mainly liberal immigration policy. And so I'd say that the black people from that generation were quite loyal to the liberals. Anecdotally, I don't have better numbers on that. Um, I think that an interesting thing that's probably happening now is that there is um, a bigger middle class of black people that didn't exist as much when my parents first came here. And I would guess that they would probably be more likely to vote conservative than the previous generations. I don't know the numbers, I don't know the percentages. I just think like I also see with the way that people vote that everybody likes a winner. And Justin Trudeau has had almost a decade in power here now, and his underwear is starting to stink a little bit. And it seems like people are tired of him. I will not put out of possibility the fact that he could win again. It is totally possible in this country that he could. But if black people who are kind of doing a little bit better than average are looking at the political situation right now, they might vote conservative because they might think to themselves, these guys are going to win. These guys are ascendant right now. Maybe they'll give me a tax break. All of these things that any middle class person is encouraged to care about. And so we have an emerging class of black people who are faces in high places that we didn't have before. And I am sure that that has created a bigger class of center right and right wing kind of political faction among the black community. If we ever kept any data in this country, we might have a better answer, but we just I when it comes to when it comes to education, when it comes to healthcare, you name it, we don't keep statistics, and we have. Oh, this is the last thing I'll say. We've had what we call employment equity policy in Canada for 40 years, where if you work for the federal government, you are supposed to be given priority as a, they call it visible minority. There's four categories. Yep. Visible minority, which includes black people, of course, indigenous, disabled people, and women. Uh, Melinda Smith is a professor out in Alberta, and she's been tracking this kind of stuff for 40 years. And Melinda Smith said at a talk that I was watching recently that after 40 years of this policy, we still can't tell you how many black people are in the federal public service because we just don't keep the data. Because the government doesn't want to be shamed by what we believe is a complete failure, not only to hire black people, but to promote and retain black people in the federal public service. And so if you just don't keep the data, nobody can hold you accountable, Yuri. And then we just keep going along this fucking treadmill that we're on. So it's a big, big problem.
That's so unbelievable. That's just so unbelievable. So is that why uh your comrade Robin Maynard, I have her book, fantastic book, Policing Black Lives. Is that why that book was such a tour de force in truth telling and myth busting, the way Eve Engler's books are, Tyler's books, and other books devoted to indigenous topics? But like, is that why like her book was such a tour de force in truth telling, because she managed to expose so much data which the government itself doesn't keep track of, because apparently there's no racism in there's no anti-black racism in
No
Canada.
anti-black racism specifically,
There
right?
is
Yeah,
indigenous racism.
I
And we
I
need to
think
acknowledge that, but not anti-black racism.
well, they have reconciliation now, so apparently anti-indigenous racism is gone too. But
Yeah.
Robin's book was great for so many reasons. But yes, I think that the amount of scholarship that she did, not just to talk about what's happening now, but historically, I think that it did a really, really good job of, in an academic way, saying all the things that you might think exist somewhere else for Black people exist here in Canada. And she particularly focused on women, right? She particularly focused on what she calls sexual minorities. She made it a deeper conversation. Um, there's a lot of people in Canada who've been doing that work and doing that scholarship,
Hmm.
particularly Black women, right? Historians like Charmaine Nelson, um, or women in gender studies scholars like Beverly Bain. I relied heavily, heavily on the work of Agnes Caliste in my book, who wrote about immigration in Canada, like the domestic workers program. So when women started coming here from Jamaica and other places to serve as domestics, this scholarship is all there. But Black people are, I think, 3.5, maybe 4% of the Canadian population. There's never been a moment where we had the numbers that
I
they
mean,
do.
there are fewer black Canadians compared to indigenous people who are minorities in their own country, but there are actually much more indigenous people. They're actually a much more larger minority and a growing one compared to black Canadians, right?
And it's also the case that Canada's creation is a product of settler colonialism that denied Indigenous people their language, their lands, their culture, took children away from families intentionally, destroyed their heritage. And so Canada's number one kind of guilt in the way that the Americans see America so thoroughly decimated indigenous people in that country. It's not to say that they're not still there. I'm not trying to erase them,
Of course, yeah,
but that project of settler colonialism was, if you want to say it this way, more successful than it was in Canada. And so um, the number one kind of founding sin that people think of when they think of America is not the destruction of indigenous life in that territory. It's slavery,
yeah, yeah,
slavery of Black people. It's actually important to note in Canada that more indigenous people were enslaved by the British than Black people were in this country. We don't ever talk about that, but it's true. And so I feel like Canada feels like its shame has something very specifically to do with its usurpation of indigenous life and land. And so that's why there's a focus on that. And you know how no one can walk and chew gum, right? At the same time.
yeah.
So we can't talk about Black struggle in Canada because we're too busy talking about this other. And there's always very toxic comparisons that who has it worse? Do Black people have it worse in Canada? Do Indigenous people have it worse? That is a colonizer's fucking like dream scenario where we would
But,
argue about that
but I would,
instead of uniting.
but luckily people don't fall. At least, well, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see that happening in Canada. I don't see that there's like this wedge between indigenous people and black people. I see more efforts of trying to build solidarity amongst the two oppressed groups. Now, the United States, unfortunately, and funny, I wasn't even planning on asking you this, but the United States, it's very depressing because I've had like five fantastic black leftists on the show, and Eve Engler has encouraged me to ask, in American spaces at American online events, and when I get American guests on the program, to ask them the following: like, what's it going to take for the Black left and People Power movement to show more urgent solidarity to Native Americans? And I've had like five Black leftists on this program. The best of the Black left who have, done programs on indigenous people, have spoken out on the racism on indigenous people, and yet, ironically, when I ask them that question, I get this kind of disturbing response of, well, some Native Americans had slaves, ergo, I'm not going to show them solidarity until they show us more solidarity and give us reparations.
I've heard that too. I've heard that too. But I do see those struggles playing out in this country as well. I think that we have been very fortunate to again have individuals who create exceptional relationships across groups and then are able to feature those. So when we talked about Black Lives Matter earlier, one of the biggest and most historic demonstrations that BLM in Toronto did was Tent City when Andrew Loku was killed by the Toronto police, and they decided not to charge the cop Andrew Doyle who killed Andrew Loku. And when they made that decision, BLM camped outside the police headquarters for 16 days. And man, was that something. That was a time, a very powerful demonstration. There were indigenous people there the entire time holding down the camp with Black Lives Matter. And after that was over, there was also demonstrations against a department called INAC, a federal department that is like, kind of like the colonial overseer for indigenous people. It's like that department of the government.
Mm-hmm.
Native affairs or different names that it's had over the years, right? Aboriginal affairs. Um, and Black people went and demonstrated at INAC buildings with indigenous folks right after the BLM stuff had wrapped up at Tent City. I don't want to completely valorize that time and say that, like, everyone was doing everything right. It was all about solidarity and unity. There were issues with that organizing too, and I think a lot of people who were part of that organizing maybe felt like, again, it should have been more multiracial. It should have been a broader coalition than what happened. But at the same time, that was about relationships, very visible public relationships that these groups were making with each other. I do think that those are important. And I do think that they model in public uh, something possible that isn't always seen right now. I also want to mention that I have a really great friend in Six Nations territory, Courtney Sky, and she's been teaching me recently about how when Black people came running away from the United States to come into Canada through the Underground Railroad, a lot of them came into indigenous territories and were taken in by Mohawk people and other Six Nations people. And because of that, there were a lot of what we call mixed race relationships and
Yeah, yeah.
children and families. And so I never want to erase the also very real history, long history of Black Indigenous people in Canada. That's a real thing. It's been happening for an extremely long time. And so solidarity across those groups should never erase the actual like shared identity between those two groups in many cases in Canada. It's complicated and it's really, really
But
cool. It's like,
what do you think it's going to take? I wonder. What do you think it's going to take for the U.S. to get to the level Canada or New Zealand is at in urgent solid in which the broad in which urgent solidarity is given to Indigenous people, and although things are not things are far from hunky dory in Canada, and New Zealand has its own set of of unique problems, but
yeah.
but 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 New Zealand is at a much better place compared to Australia, where there's genocide, denialism, and the Aboriginal people there are actually in a worse conditions than in the United States. But still, like the U.S. and like if you're Indigenous, it sucks to be to be brought up in the U.S. or Australia. So when do you think what's it going to take for the U.S. to get to the level Canada is at, or the level New Zealand is at?
I don't know. I That's a really hard question to answer. I don't think I know the answer to that question. Maybe the only thing I can say is that the erasure of indigenous life and history in America is a lot bigger challenge to overcome. You know, I mentioned like reconciliation flippantly, but I think that reconciliation, whatever it means to people, represents the idea upon the part of the Canadian government that it actually has to do something about history, that it is still responsible for history, that Indigenous people's history is still alive in how they're living today. I don't hear those conversations happening in the United States of America. I feel like the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline project was one of the most radical things I've ever seen in North America. Um, and I know that my Indigenous homies that I speak to here, there is a lot of like cross border learning and sharing. And of course, before the colonized forces came here from France and England and other places, the borders that we have didn't exist, right? And so um, maybe we can hope for more um, sharing and support between nations of indigenous peoples that reside in Canada or in the United States to boost each other up, because a hell of a lot of people from Canada went down to Dakota access pipeline demonstrations. Like I know people who were down there, uh, and it was a revolutionary moment, you know. And I think we need more things like that. And I think people here in so-called Canada were really happy to get to go be part of that struggle with Indigenous folks in America.
Uh, so weird, but yeah, I'll just say that like
I'm just closing the window while you keep talking. I
sure,
can
sure,
still
sure.
hear you. Keep going.
Okay, yeah, no, I just wish that like if when it comes to like Canadian influence, I wish that the Americans like took lessons from Canada in how to show in how to show urgent solidarity to Indigenous people, and I wish Canada would take the lessons and the influence when it comes to America's anti-imperialism and pour that into Canada. But hey, here's hoping. But yeah, no, but yeah, I'll also just say like like one thing like all of those people in the United States, whether it's the Black left or anyone who in which the plight of Native Americans doesn't reach their like top five things that keeps them up at night. Look, we're never like you're never ever going to get rid of white supremacy in the United States and eradicate imperialism overseas, like in a place like Palestine or Haiti or Latin America, without giving nationhood back to Native Americans. So as the late John Pilger would say, nothing's going to change until we right the wrongs of the bloody past, and until we give back their nationhood, we can never claim. We can never claim our own, and yeah, here's hoping that that all of that changes very soon. And I think that's a and then yeah, I think that's a perfect segue to talk about the police. Now, since you're an abolitionist, I wanted to ask you if you've ever had police whistleblowers or ex-cops get in touch with you, and if so, are they more radical reformists or have they been converted to police abolitionism, and why do you think yeah and depending on the answer you give, why do you think it's one more than the other of radical reformism as opposed to abolitionism?
Okay. Um, First of all, no, I haven't had many inside police sources. I feel that there's probably a variety of reasons for that. First of all, I, other than you know, my earlier part of my career working at places like News Talk 1010 Radio, or which is part of Bell Media, or the Toronto Star, I haven't really worked a lot for major institutional forces. And when I did, I was a part timer. I was a contract worker. I was I was lower on the totem pole.
Freelancer, right?
Exactly.
Which sounds
Exactly.
great, but in general, it's no, right?
It has its benefits if you don't like money. But you know, um,
Duly
no,
noted that.
it's like um, I say this because I don't think I had the institutional backing for people to be like, this is the guy to come to with something like this, right? I'm not getting the 3,000 word feature on the front of the newspaper the way that some of the, by the way, very excellent white journalists that I worked around, they were getting those things. So I feel like if you're gonna gotta get good tip, you've got some good insider information. I don't seem like the person who's gonna have the clout to carry that forward if you're looking around. So I think that's one reason I didn't really make a lot of those relationships. I think that the other reason too is like connected to that. Um, it is safer for white journalists to come out with those kinds of stories. And I think people intuitively know that. Um, it's one thing for a white respected journalist to come out and be like, something's wrong with the police force. And people are like, oh, what interesting and fascinating reporting. But when somebody of my color does it, it's like, oh, well, of course you would say that because you're biased and you hate the police, right? And so I think that there's
Yeah.
something.
Oh, yes. Ah,
Yeah,
that's interesting. So it's kind of like so it's kind of like uh how Palestinians, indigenous people, you know, we know their stories through them, but it seems as if people only give them the compassion, or people really go, "Oh, wow, that's pretty messed up the way the way they're being treated by their settler colonial superiors in Israel," until they actually hear it from an Ilan Pape, Israeli historian who speaks out on Israel, a John Pilger who speaks out against his own country's treatment of their indigenous people, or yeah, Jewish anti-Zionist voices, or white people speaking out on anti-black racism. So you get like
I yeah, the Tim Wises of my time. I'm dating myself with that reference, but some people remember Tim
I know
Wise.
Tim Weiss. I've
Right.
seen that documentary, White Like Me, Media Education Foundation, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, Tim Wise was a big
Yeah.
deal when I was like in university and stuff. But yes, I think that's exactly right, Yuri. People want to hear from what they think is a credible source when it's going to be critical of the status quo. And a credible source is not usually a black independent kind of person. Um, but I think that the other thing actually is that as my work changed and morphed from a more reformist type of position myself as a journalist to a more radical and we've got to overhaul the entire system of policing kind of belief, it made it less really, I think, desirable for reformists to come to me. Because to answer the other part of your question, I do think that most of the people who do that kind of work are reformist in their heart. That they think that there's bad apples in the system, there are bad individuals and things that need to be rooted out, rules that need to be changed, and they're going to the media in the hopes of righting a wrong. Um, I
Mm,
don't think that the police can be fundamentally altered in the society that we live in. They have too much power. There's too much fear. Um, they have to be dismantled. But to the extent that I'm willing to say that, I think that somebody who maybe thinks like, well, let's talk to somebody serious about like a thing that we can actually do. And they're not going to pick me for that kind of a story. Um, I wouldn't take a story like that now. I'm always interested in leaks. Don't get me wrong. If somebody has some juicy information about something that's happening inside the police force that we need to know about, I'm always interested in those things. However, back in the day, for example, and I was critiqued for this, and I give credit to people like Ronaldo Walcott who were really publicly critiquing me about this. I used to write about black cops who I thought were kind of getting a raw deal inside the police force. I had sympathy for them because I saw them as being trying to do the right thing
Yeah.
in a really bad system, what I would have called then a broken system, even though now I know very well that there's nothing broken about it. It is functioning as intended, right? But back then, I think I would have been more likely to have that opportunity to do those kinds of stories and to meet those kinds of people. But no, my impression, again, anecdotally, is that whistleblowers want to preserve and improve upon a system often more than they want to dismantle it and try something else. And that often comes as a result of spending massive amounts of time in that system and themselves becoming invested and really wanting to see change. I'm not hating on it, right? I just think it's a different perspective from my own, where if I can just give this quick example, we had a huge case out here recently, a criminal trial of a man named Umar Zamir. I don't know if you heard about this. You did.
Yes,
Pakistani.
yes. From both Barry Wise letter of NDP Socialist Caucus, Socialist Action Canada, and L. But yes,
Yeah.
do talk about this
So,
story.
yeah, really quickly, a Pakistani born immigrant from Malaysia who was living, he lives in Thornhill in north of Toronto. And doing the most Canadian thing that you can do, doing a Canada Day celebration with his wife and toddler 3 years ago. They were downtown and they were getting into their car in an underground parking lot beneath City Hall to come back home. And they're going to drive away. Umar Zamir, well, he was driving. His wife was 8 months pregnant and they had their toddler in the car. Two people ran up to the windows of their car, started banging on the windows of the car. There's been so much police publicity about car theft in the city of Toronto.
Yeah,
This man thought he was being robbed. He thought they're coming for my car, they're coming to rob us, something like that. And he panicked. He tried to reverse his car and he was going to drive away. And this van pulls up and blocks his path. And it's like something is wrong here. Like, what the hell is going on? Um, in his panic to get away, he ran over one of the people who had first approached his car. He was then arrested by the people in the van, and he was then, it dawned on him, these are the police. But they weren't wearing any uniforms, they weren't wearing badges, they weren't driving a police van, it was unmarked. And they were profiling Umar Zamir because they were looking for a suspect with brown skin who didn't look anything like him, but they decided to target him in that underground parking
but they
lot.
didn't even. But they didn't even say that they were police, like or like
They
show.
did not. They did not. They said in court that they told him that, but no one believed them. The judge seemed very skeptical of their story, and the jury absolutely seems not to have believed that they identified themselves at any time because they charged Umar Zamir with first degree murder and they alleged that he wanted to run over Jeffrey Northrup, the police constable that he killed. And the question is just like, fucking why? Why would a guy who's coming home from Canada Day celebrations with his family be like, here, there's some cops, they're coming to talk to me. I don't want to talk to them. Why don't I just kill one of them instead and ruin my life? Why would he do that? It doesn't make any sense. It's such a stupid, like ridiculous police narrative. It's like cop brained to the like extreme. Okay. So the jury thankfully saw through this. He had an excellent lawyer and he was acquitted. Um, and there was an outrage because it was really clear to the public that the police lied throughout this entire case and that they had just fabricated things. And then after it was over, the police chief, Myron Demke, said, we were hoping for a different outcome. Like the guy is innocent, but you were hoping he would be found guilty anyway. Like, okay. Um,
Wow.
so in moments like these, I feel like there's like an awakening, or like a mini little awakening of like the public being like, whoa, this is messed up. But then we very quickly slide back into the world where there's no alternative. Yuri,
Yeah.
I don't believe that the next time the police are not going to lie. I don't believe that their most senior leader, after all that evidence showing that they're lying comes out, I don't believe that the next person is going to be like, you're right, guys. We as the police are guilty. We are very bad boys and girls. I cannot go back to reform of the police. I can't. And I've made that so publicly clear during my work. And it's changed the shape of what I do and who I do it with and how I report because I think that's delusional. The police are a mob. They wanted a man to sit in jail for the rest of his life for a crime they know he didn't commit. And it's the way that the forces gather around the worst people. You know, people say bad apples, right? And we know that the metaphor of there's a few bad apples, it's bankrupt because the saying is that bad apples spoil the whole bunch, right? So for you to say there are only bad apples, you're missing the metaphor. But I would say that beyond that, right? What actually tends to happen in policing is the people who engage in the worst and most damaging and violent behavior get the most support from the police force. The police circle the wagons around people who commit murder, around people who rape and who sexually assault, people who beat black people after profiling them for no reason. The police doesn't throw those individuals to the wolves and say, we don't want you here. They actually identify deeply with them and they get scared that if those people's misconduct is punished, then something that they do in the future will not be looked over either. And so I know that. And I just can't pretend anymore that something is going to come in and change that policing culture. It is rotten. It is bankrupt to its core. It has to be dismantled. We do need public safety. Not from them, though. They're not going to provide it. And the idea that they're going to change someday in the future because they get a good leader or because we do some fucking training. I read the fucking reports from the 1980s that talk about we need more training and we need more black officers. They've been saying that in this country for 40 years. So if people want to say I am delusional because I don't think reform of the police is possible, that's fine. I think I'm living more in the real world than the people who want reform.
And that's well, that's a perfect segue then to this question, oh, which is the last time I had you on the program, of course, I made the argument that, that the police still are a necessary evil. So how do we build, a world without police? How would that society deal then with the issue of organized crime, scam artists, con artists? Because though if we were to, because I think even if we were to build a wonderful socialist world, we would still have organized crime. And even if we got rid of the discredited prohibitionist drug war, organized crime still finds ingenious ways of still enslaving people and wrecking terror, as well as as well as scam artists. So what's your response to that and the issue, and of course the often cheap, counter argument people use towards abolitionists, which is the serial killers. Come on, don't we still need the police to deal with that?
Okay. Um, Organized crime, right? Again, I'm not trying to say this to be cute. The police are organized crime. They're the best funded mob in the entire world. Um, the police can literally do things like have drug squads that operate for years, stealing drugs off of the organized criminals that they are chasing and then reselling them or taking them home. Um, like that's not one off story. Like that's how policing works. It is corrupt by its nature because it doesn't have any oversight, because no one has the authority to check the police. And so like we think the mob is bad because they live by their own rules, but we've created a system to deal with them that does the exact same thing, but just has like state power and weapons. Like you can't tackle impunity by creating a force with more impunity. Like there still has to be accountability when you're going after people who are doing something that's harmful. For me, this actually starts with two principles: the license to kill that we give the police, number one, and the weapons that we give them to enable their license to kill. In the course of investigating, say, human trafficking, which is a real problem, do you need a gun? To investigate something, do you need a gun? I investigate things all the time. People in government investigate things all the time. Communities in the village, when Bruce MacArthur was fucking disappearing queer men from the village and the police were doing nothing about it, they did their own investigations. People have found relatives that the police gave up on who were trafficked, who were kidnapped. Okay. You don't need a gun to do an investigation. You don't need a gun to patrol a traffic stop when the lights go out. You don't need a gun to interact with our children in a school. I don't believe in cops in school. I fought against it for many, many years, but you don't need a gun. The first thing we have to do is to say, forget about like the notion of policing as such as we understand it right now. In this interaction between human beings, does lethal force need to be an option? Yes or no? That is the first question that we need to ask ourselves. And even in the vast majority of police activity that exists today, the carriage of weapons and the ability to have lethal force on your hip at all times, to me, this does not apply. It's not necessary. And so we begin to dismantle the police force by being like, you don't just get to carry lethal force with you everywhere you go. You don't get to take it home with you at the end of the night to your partner that you're going to intimidate and abuse. You don't get to do these things. That's not necessary to investigate and prosecute harm. It's just not. So let's start there. Okay. Um, the thing that happens at the end sometimes when you have found out that, okay, the organized criminals are running a ring and this is where they keep a bunch of people locked up and vulnerable, and that's terrible. Let's like use a really sexy police like TV scenario. Okay. And you've got to go in there and you've got to rescue the people who are being held captive.
Well, yeah, and people would argue, well, organized criminals, they use guns and they
They
use
sure
other
do.
things to keep control. Ergo, when you're investigating them, you have to be very prepared for a gunfight because these, yeah, oh,
I agree with that,
yeah,
but like you know, I remember police killing that happened in Toronto a few years back of a young man named Kwasi Skeen Peters, a black man who the police said was wanted for a double homicide. They had a Canada-wide a warrant out for his arrest, and they were looking for him everywhere. And they identified him in Toronto one evening, and they set up around the nightclub where he was going to go into. The police let Kwasi Skeen Peters go into that nightclub without stopping him under the belief that they thought he was armed at the time. Why would you let somebody go into a nightclub with a weapon? Why wouldn't you stop them? Then Kwasi Skeen Peters came out of the nightclub and got all the way back to his car. And when he sat down in the car, the police ran out on him and they said he fired at them first. He fired at them from inside his car through the windshield. But you let my man get back to his car. Why would you do that? Like you could just arrest him when he was going to get a sandwich in the middle of the day somewhere. Like you don't need to do these things. So like that's the other thing here is that like if you do real investigative work, these brute shows of force not only are not necessary, but they become counterproductive. Okay. Because let's say Umar Zamir was really the guy that you were looking for in that parking lot because they were looking for somebody who had done a stabbing. Let's say that he was the guy.
Yeah.
Um, Identifying his car and not having him even know you're there and letting him go home and then tracking him, following him, and then getting him one day when he's cutting the grass, that's safe. That means Jeffrey Northrop probably doesn't get run over by Umar Zamir. But it's the police's desire to have this domination over other people that leads us to think, well, of course they always have to have a weapon because they're always going to be in danger. But the reason they're always in danger is because they're always trying to fuck with people. Like, let's just be honest. That's why the police are always feeling under siege because they're going to do it first. And we have to minimize and reduce that. Like, we used to take noise complaints in Toronto to the police. That has stopped as official policy. I'm not saying it doesn't happen anymore, but as official policy, noise complaints now go to city bylaw officers because somebody realized the folly of sending somebody with a gun to a noise complaint. Why would you do that? And then you're going to be like, oh, and they escalated on me. Well, you brought a gun to their house for a noise complaint. So, yeah, maybe they are going to get mad and be like, what the fuck are you doing here? Maybe they're going to be traumatized because of the other 15 people that they know who have been messed up by the police in their neighborhood. Like, this problem is perpetuating itself. Okay. So, I believe in investigative work. And I think that good investigative work takes away the need to use brute force. When you're a cop, you don't need to use this ever. You don't need to use your brain because you have this little get out of any situation. I'm just going to overwhelm you with force card that you can play at any time. And that's the model of policing that we use here in settler colonial Canada, which used the gun to push Indigenous people off territory that the crown wanted for itself. It is a very, people ask me all the time, well, are there other places that don't have police carrying weapons? Of fucking course there are. Of course there are. All over the world, there are places that police don't carry guns. People can't even imagine it. Uh, they've been so fed this steady diet of fear that they equate policing with danger when it's the police instigating the danger. So that's just a long way of saying you can investigate without a gun. You can fact find without a gun. And in most cases, if you need to apprehend people, you can do it without a gun. The other side of this equation, though, is I don't think people should be allowed to have recreational handguns. That world has to come to an end so that we don't have to be afraid of organized criminals overrunning the general public. Like, if you stop giving them fucking weapons, then it's going to be a little harder for them to do that.
Desmond, I can tell you that's not going to fly in the United States. I would love for that to fly in the United States because I think so much violence happens in the U.S. is because every has an effing gun and so forth like that, and because of that stupid Second Amendment, which, putting aside its racist origins and how it was implemented, but if you actually read the Second Amendment, it's not even talking about me having a gun, my neighbor having a gun, and all of us going hunting or shooting at beer bottles. It's about having a local militias having the guns in case government ever goes full tyranny and you got self-defense. But it has nothing to do with how our American brothers and sisters interpret the Second Amendment, which is everybody has a gun. And but
And
I
and as a and as a
but
result,
I honestly do think, and I sometimes say this when when I defend the police and say that we still need the police. But I also think, like, if people across the United States also weren't didn't all have guns, maybe the police wouldn't be so psychotic and paranoid about and thinking that they have to whip
well,
up
we
guns and so
we
forth.
we we've got a couple hundred years of U.S. history now. So which is more likely? is it more likely that guns are going to bring about a stable order in the United States, or that guns are going to result in more and more percentage of the population killing themselves, killing their neighbors, killing their wives and partners? Which one is it? Like, over a long enough timeline, which one of these two outcomes is going to come to pass? Like, one of them is already coming to pass. And again, people want me to live in a world where I pretend that maybe one day guns will equal safety. The United States is one of the most dangerous places in the world because of the fact that everyone has a gun. I actually don't know how you unwind that. That is their problem. I don't live in America, but it's
Okay,
also I
yeah,
was just going to say it's also our problem here in Canada because so many of the weapons that are used in this country to make people unsafe come from the United States of America. And so like there has to be a cultural shift. But look, like that tweet that lives rent free in my head about Sandy Hook kind of being the referendum on whether the United States could change its gun culture. The answer is that they can't, because somebody can
yeah.
go into a school and murder people's children and there's still no meaningful reform. So, they've created a machine and that machine is going to self-destruct, and it's very sad. And I don't know how to get out of it, but I can't give in to it either. I can't capitulate to the idea that because they have set that machine in motion, well, we just got to like live with it. I will continue to say that um, no civilian in the course of their daily life needs to have a handgun. Hunting is different. Hunting has a completely different history, but people want guns for self-defense, and that is a recipe for endless suffering. So,
But the,
so
the animal rights person me still says F hunting, but
sure, sure, sure,
but,
sure.
but,
We'll
but yeah,
another podcast.
but going back to what you were saying about the United States, I remember Democracy Now had somebody who was involved in bringing sensible gun control to Australia after the Port Arthur massacre in Tasmania. And I know that really great program that was on RT, Watching the Hawks, Willie, no, Tyrell Ventura and Tabitha Wallace, who's been on this show, they went to Australia to compare the gun control, the gun culture there to the U.S. And then they got into a very interesting thing about the militarism and settler colonialism. But my problem, though, with both of those programs, as noble as they are, is of course Australia could pass sensible gun control laws because they don't have that stupid Second Amendment, and
Yeah, yeah. So
and,
yeah,
and
so
the
like this
U.S.
is
And the U.S. has that stupid Second Amendment. And the messed up thing is if you were Bernie Sanders, Claudia De La Cruz, Dr. Jill Stein, or Ralph Nader, even if you're part of that radical left, if you were to say, like, Bernie gets cheers when he says things like we need to have a constitutional amendment and get money out of politics. Everybody applauds him, even right wingers. If Bernie Sanders or any of the other people I mentioned were to say we need to have a constitutional amendment and we need to repeal the Second Amendment, their political career would be over, you know, snap of a finger, blink of an eye. So like you, I've stopped caring about the whole issue of gun controls in the US because I know because I know on that particular issue, even like the best of the left has gotten just
well,
messed up
it's
on
not
that.
it's
It's like
there's no
it's like Brexit in the UK. You can argue till you're blue in the face why Britain leaving the European Union wasn't going to usher in this wonderful socialist utopia and so forth, but that's just like in that a dark part of their mentality that you just can't really shift.
well, I would say too though that it's a symptom. The gun culture in America is a symptom of an oppressed and terrified population who can't imagine, like they sit around imagining that a black guy is going to come into their house and try to take their TV, and like that's their very sad life, and I think that it's truly sad that people are captured by that level of fear, but it's the fear that people live in that has to be altered before we can maybe see the possibility of the gun culture shifting. Because the gun culture isn't a thing unto itself. It's just a manifestation of people's insecurities because they live in a society where people aren't encouraged to take care of one another. America is individualism personified, and the handgun is individualism personified. It's my way of protecting myself when everything else breaks down, right? So America needs to it needs a socialist revolution, man. What can I say? Like
No doubt about that.
before we have the conversation about guns, things have to radically change in that country. And I mean, COVID was, I think, a really great example of some like modest reliefs that came from the government initially for people during COVID. And then it was like, okay, we're done. Fuck you, get back to work. And in a society that's not going to take care of people, they're going to resort to whatever functional or dysfunctional ways to try and take care of themselves. So it's a bigger
But
problem.
but interesting what you're saying, because I know Michael Moore, in his documentary Bowling for Columbine, he asked, one of the creators of that ghastly propaganda, the most popular propaganda show, Cops. And he was asking him, why can't you go after white collar criminals and stuff like that? And he was saying it would not make interesting television. Like, can you imagine, like, like people storming into, crooked banks and stuff like that? Unless they're throwing the phone or running away, you're not. It's people aren't going to watch that on television. So, in terms of how we deal with the scam artist, the con artist, the people who con uh, old people out of their life savings, or even
Yes.
now, I mean, I on Twitter, I can't tell you the amount of like scam artists I get. Please donate to this charity, or the porn spam artists and stuff like that. But in terms of how we deal with that, if the if the U.S. can arrest the people who committed the fraud of the Enron scandal, or taken for questioning all of those dodgy banksters that brought the economy down, then then I guess you can go after the scam artists and the con artists and not have violence, unless you think that they are going to be armed and so forth. So I'm curious your response on that.
Well, okay, like there's a few things here. So when we talk about cops, I remember that clip. My friend Shama Rangwala and I have a little podcast that we never record that's called Replay. And we did a whole episode on Bowling for Columbine when the Uvalde shooting happened in Texas. That also coincided with the 20th anniversary of Bowling for Columbine, which is still a brilliant, brilliant film. Um, One of my favorite documentaries, I have to say.
Oh yeah, it's
Um,
it's, it's one of Michael Moore's best, along with
he is brilliant.
you know,
But when that guy who created Cops is talking to him, first of all, that guy is a racist piece of garbage. Okay, when he says people aren't interested in watching the executives get arrested, it's because the executives are white men. That's what he means. People want to see black people running away from the police with no shirt on. That's what they want to see. He was being really clear about that. He just didn't say all the words. Um,
oh wow, I completely missed that then.
oh no,
Oh wow,
like
interesting.
Cops is such a racist construct of a show. Like it's poor white people and black people. It's about class and race, and it's about getting to watch black people get their comeuppance for being social misfits. That's what that show is all about. It's like super basic. Oh my God, Scared Straight. Have you ever seen that show where they like take black kids who are misbehaving in school and they take them into the jail so that convicted criminals can scream in their faces that you're going to end up here if you keep going and you're going to be my little bitch in jail? Like, have you seen this stuff? Like the America, I want to write
Junk reality show. Wow.
it. If I ever went back to school, I would seriously consider like wanting to do a thesis on that show Scared Straight. I think it is so revealing about American culture and the way that America actually uses black people to perpetuate the violence being done to them. So because it's black people, the scary big buff black guy in jail who's yelling at all these kids that he's going to be their daddy when they come to jail. Like it's like they're getting people who have been victimized by the system to replicate it in real. It's so wild. But anyway, I feel like Cops was a deeply racist project by a man who was trying to tell us something to else that is like it's there if we're looking for it, which is he worked for Fox, right? His show aired on Fox. So the people at Fox are the epitome of the corporate class criminal that he's talking about. Like all these sex assaults that we've seen exposed in Fox News and all of these things, right?
Yeah, of course.
Right? So by
Rupert
Bill
Murdoch, I say
O'Reilly,
anymore.
right? Bill O'Reilly and Roger Ailes and all of these people, they're criminals in the sense of the word that is used colloquially today. But do they want to air a show about their peers being arrested and scrutinized and taken to jail? No. And I think that's where we actually have to look at it is that like um that isn't framed as being crime in our society. The crime is done by the lower classes of people. Donald Trump said that I don't pay my taxes because I'm smart, not because I'm a criminal. It's because I'm smart. When rich people do crime, it's because they're intelligent. Mob bosses are intelligent and they're crafty and they're resourceful, not poor people. Poor people are just embarrassing and need to be taught a lesson. Um, the scammer online who's taking Granny's like social insurance number
Yeah.
um, needs to be investigated. And I also am interested though in what we're going to do when we catch them. Are we going to create a cell? And are we going to employ people to police that cell, to give them the shittiest food in the world, to cut them off from their family? Are we going to give them regular beatings? Are we going to deny them health care when they take the beating and can't recover from it? Like,
Some, I mean, some people would say yes to them and yes to again Tony Montana, Tony Soprano, uh, and the real life John Gotti's of the world, and
but like John Gotti is an exceptional figure. Like most people who engage in crime aren't John Gotti. They're not willing to kill a whole bunch of people in order to make a life for themselves and other people. However, even the prospect of spending the rest of their lives in jail or being executed in America doesn't deter people like that from doing what they do. It doesn't stop them. And so I think it's actually just as important that we think about the criminal justice system and what are we going to do when we catch people? Because when we catch them with the police, who again can use any amount of force that they like, the message is you're going to be punished. You're going to be punished immediately. That the police are your judge and jury. The police are the criminal justice system. And if they feel like giving you an immediate punishment when they catch you, they're allowed to do that. I think we have to get away from that notion. And I think we have to say, okay, you're scamming people's visas online. We're going to catch you. And then what are we going to do? I think we got to make you make restitution to the people that you scammed. So you should have to give back the money that you took from them. You should have to do service to support those people. You should have to write letters to them and their family about the impact of what you have done to them. It should be restorative. We need a restorative system that doesn't suggest people just do bad things because they haven't been punished badly enough. Um, Let me get real with you for a second, Yuri. Not that we haven't been this whole time. Um, some of us have survived abuses in our lives. Particularly, I'm talking about as children. When you beat a child, when you abuse a child, what are you saying to them? You're saying you can't learn by corrective means of me talking to you, by means of me persuading you with something, by means of me explaining to you the harm of your behavior. The only way you can learn is if I hurt you. And as somebody who experienced that myself growing up, it really pains me to live in a world where we still act like that about people throughout the course of their whole life, that they can only learn something at the threat of being harmed by somebody else. That is the entire philosophy of our criminal justice system and the police. So I don't think that the person who's scamming visas needs to be beaten up or needs to be put in a cell. I think that they need to atone for the harm that they've done. And I also know that we would eliminate, and you know this too, um, a significant amount of the harms and social dysfunctions, not all of them, but a significant amount of them tomorrow if we just gave people a living wage, if we gave people a house to live in with running water and with a nice shower and some meals. If people had the things that they need in this life to survive, fewer of them, fewer, not all, fewer of them would make the choices that they're making to exploit other people. It doesn't deal with everybody, but I would actually like to try that, knowing that it's going to reduce a significant amount of that activity right off the top and then build upon that. So you see, you take the guns away from the police in the scenario I was talking about earlier, and then the world doesn't end, and you say, see, we took noise complaints away from the police and we're still all here. Everything's okay. Hey, we're going to start taking mental health calls away from the police. And do you know what? There are models of this all over the world where people without weapons respond to mental health calls instead of the police. We're going to do that for a few years. And we're going to show you that the world didn't explode as a result of it. Because again, the philosophy is people who have mental health issues or are in crisis need to be met with the threat of death. They need to be told, look, fucking sit down and shut up, or we're going to kill you. When there are violent incidents in our subway system here in Toronto, and they mobilize the police as they did last year or 2 years ago, and they've got these like guys with like huge guns bigger than them standing in the subway. They're doing this in New York right now too. That's the message. Bad people who want to come into the system, so called bad people, you come here, we'll kill you. Youri, I just don't want to live in that world anymore. I don't want to live in the world where the message to people is we will take your life from you. We have the power to do so if you do something that society doesn't approve of. We need an incentive culture. We need an incentive for people to treat each other decently rather than a punitive culture that is always holding a dagger over people's heads. That's abolition. And you're kind enough to call me an abolitionist. I don't usually call myself that. I'm learning. I'm learning, my bro, and I'm trying to incorporate the way that I've been taught to unlearn all of the shit that got me here. Yeah? But like I'm just understanding more and more all the time that it's not even just the police, it's the criminal justice system. It's taking kids away from their parents through the child welfare system. Manitoba, they did a study. This is why I talk about keeping data. They did a study on child welfare system in Manitoba. 87% of the cases of children being apprehended from their parents were not because the parents were beating the children. It is because the children had poor parents who the state deemed were too poor to take care of them. 87%. 87%. So if I say abolish child welfare, people are like, yeah, he's fucking crazy. Don't listen to him. You could get rid of 87% of the cases tomorrow by taking the hundreds of millions of dollars that you use to apprehend people from their parents with police and social workers, take them into a foster care family, give the foster care family a fucking pile of money, put the kids through therapy because now they're traumatized. They're not with their original family. You just take all that money and give it to them in the front end. Like it's not that crazy to abolish these systems. It just involves changing the way that we think about addressing problems.
Yeah, and that also means we have to eradicate institutional racism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and heteronormativity, and so forth. And it's funny when you were saying, "Oh, I'm just thinking about Australia right now, where more money is spent surveilling impoverished Aboriginal families than actually helping them out. And even, yeah, and even even when it comes to alcoholism, like Australia, like celebrates, like alcoholism when it's done by white people at a stupid football game or rugby and stuff like that. But and if a poor white person who, yes, does experience classism because that's the nature of capitalism, but
Yes.
poor white person going through alcoholism is going to be shown compassion, whereas the Aboriginal person who suffers from alcoholism because of institutional racism and whatnot, he's well, he most likely will, will be murdered by the police, death in custody. But that's just, but no, that's very interesting. What you were saying.
Can
We've
I give you can I give you one more but just about
Yeah,
this
sure,
really
sure,
quickly
sure.
because I think it's like really relevant. The Ottawa Police Service just did a study about fare enforcement on their transit system. I would love, as part of this work of, you know, taking down carceral institutions, I would love for there never to be any more fare inspection in any transit system anywhere in the world. Uh, Unsurprisingly, Ottawa did a study that found that their fare inspection regime loses money because, surprise, surprise, trying to crack down on people who didn't have $3 for the fare by giving them a $250 ticket, not really a money winner. You know, it's not really going to produce the result that you want. But they don't want the money. They want to create a system and an atmosphere of what I was just talking about, which is don't come on here with no money. We'll fuck you up. That is actually more important to them. They're willing to take a loss to scare people rather than, for example, investing the money from the program into like giving some fair relief to people who need it. Do you know what I'm saying? So like this is where the mentality is at right now, is that it really prizes the ability to intimidate people as a belief that deterrence is the ultimate social good. Scaring people into doing the right thing is the way that a society functions. It's not true. We've got to get past that, and we've got to try and, as I said, create incentive culture rather than punitive culture. Do things on the front end instead of trying to recover afterwards.
I think it's a perfect place to end. There are two other questions I wanted to ask you, but I don't want to go. But I don't want to go too much over time because it's 1:17 right now. But again, this will be the first of many conversations, and we'll definitely have to explore deeper these topics again. Now the next time I want to have you on, here's here's an interesting idea. In terms of you know trying to convert me to police abolitionism.
How am I doing, by the way? Because we've had two of these now. How am I doing? Am I making any good points?
I would say you, Nora Loretto, and Al Jones and Bernita Haynes. I also have to give a shout out to my friend Bernita. Have been doing a very good job in shifting me into, hey, maybe we actually did this to the police. And we
Well,
also have
what
to, but I also have to say we also need to abolish, the military, the CIAs, the NSAs, like abolish a lot of them. But
I'm with you. Don't worry. I'm with you. But we'll work on you, and more importantly, we'll work on your audience. We'll keep chipping away at you.
yeah. And the next time, now, the next time I have you on, do watch that movie, Changeling, and we're gonna have an
Okay.
interesting conversation about that. And there are some documentaries I've watched, some true crime documentaries, and I think what we should do is like I'll give you the titles of them, and if you can find them on Netflix, that's great. And we should do a documentary review on that. And I want to see if you're still on, okay, police abolitionism, because this is how we would be approaching this situation when it comes to scam artist or the serial killer or a large or a problem at large in society that affects everybody. So I think we should do that. But
Oh,
instead,
I'm totally game. And if I've not made it clear throughout the courses of our conversations, like I'm just looking for an alternative to the police. I'm not looking for a world where people get to do whatever they want. Like, um, you know, it occurs to me that when I was misbehaving in school as a child, we could have had a police officer come in with a paddle and hit everybody who was misbehaving. For some strange reason, we chose not to do that. I'm just like really trying to fundamentally
and that
question the.
disturbs us. That I mean that should disturb us. But even the like, but even the idea of anybody in authority shouting at a child and making the child cry because can't answer a math question or has like a learning disability or something like that. I also have a problem. I also have a problem with that, and I think that also needs to be addressed. I think in general we need to find. I don't know. I think I mean in general I find being nicer costs less energy than being an asshole, which takes a lot of energy.
And puts more evil into the world every time it's happening, right? But like I'm just saying that if somebody steals your car and you're like, fuck, this really sucks, I want to get it back. I want a force of people to do that work who don't also, you know, defend murder when it's done by their people, defend theft when it's done by their people. I just want a group of people who aren't as empowered to be completely corrupt as the police are. And I'm not saying don't investigate the car theft. Please investigate it by all means. When you find the car, use your brain to think about a way that you can bring the person who took the car to account instead of running up on them and being like, freezer will kill you. That's all I'm saying. There will still be investigations in the world that I think of. In fact, some might say there would still be police. I just fight that and I disagree with it because the police signifies something in this society that to me is intolerable and unsustainable. So I don't want to reform them. I insist on it being something else. I don't even want the people who currently work for the police force to be part of this new thing. Like, we're going to have to redevelop it, and you're going to have a whole different process of qualification in order to be able to do this work. I don't want to be elitist when it comes to education, but police in our society are not encouraged to get an education before they become police officers. And in the course of their duties, when we talk about this foolish just dodge of training and training and training, and they need training and training and training. No, they need to know how to think. They need to know how to problem solve. They need to know how to have a flexible mind to engage situations, many of which can be dangerous, without force. I used to work at a drop-in center for youth. That was where I started my work in Toronto. I dealt with the same people that the police say are too dangerous to confront without a weapon. Those were the people that came into our drop-in center. Okay, young people who sleep rough outside, who use drugs, who sell drugs. Some of them carry weapons. Guess what? I'm not a coward, man. I didn't have to fucking have a weapon when people come into my drop-in center to teach them who's going to be in charge in that space. I have to actually deal with them as a person. That's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for the person who comes to you asking for accountability to deal with you as a human being and not as a little worm that they're going to crush if you don't listen. We will still have investigations. There will still be laws. I'm not asking us to not have systems that human beings have always established to keep order. There's still
Rob,
going to be.
and the Robert Pictons of the world, like there is going to be like a special place for them that they don't, you know, do harm towards people. But
Yeah, and some people, by the way, have to actually physically be kept away. And this is a challenge. I think I brought this up on your show before, but one of the challenges for abolitionists is we don't have an answer for what to do with Paul Bernardo or Luca Magnotta or Jeffrey Dahmer, that is not a jail cell, because those people are going to hurt people. And they demonstrate that their capacity is to hurt people over and over and over again. So, unfortunately, I don't have an answer for the 1% of people who are kind of the notorious ones that we all talk about. But I'm not going to build a society based on my greatest fear of that 1% of anomalous people who do not represent the majority of crime. I could have, um, you know, a moat around my house to stop a burglar from coming in, but it's overkill. I don't need that. I'm not going to prepare my whole life for the worst possible situation. I have to live. And this is our problem, is that we are not allowed to live in this society because we are trained to always be perceiving the worst possible threat. The guy walking down the street has a gun. He's going to kill me. He's going to rob me. He's going to get me. The people in the school are going to indoctrinate my children and they're going to turn them trans. The government is going to steal all my money. We are under siege all of the time. And it creates a world where the things like punitive systems make sense because you got to protect yourself. But there's a level of protecting oneself that becomes irrational and starts to do self-harm. And we are way past that point in society, and we gotta reel it back in.
Yeah,
So
and
I,
here's hoping, and here's hoping that happens, but we actually have to try it. We actually have to try, making mental health into part of a single payer system. We actually should see, well, we're spending all this money on surveillance, we're spending all this money on the police, we're spending all these monies on prisons. Why don't we actually spend it on alleviating poverty? Because as you, Al Jones, and countless other people have said, majority of the crimes are related because people are impoverished and they're desperate, and so they rob, and then they or they join drug gangs and stuff like that. And as prohibition has shown, the drug war has shown, that's doesn't that doesn't eradicate drug use, nor does it even eradicate organized crime. In fact, making them illegal gives an incentive for that. So
it's not even just even things like poverty. We also know that like so many of the people in prison in Canada have head injuries. This is some of the most fascinating research I've ever read in my life. And it shows how people who get involved in like violent criminal charges and convictions, there's a disproportionate amount of head injury. What is happening to people when they're growing up that is causing them to be in these situations where, for example, where someone else might react by trying to talk or by trying to reason through something, that another person reacts angrily and with violence and lashes out? Why is that the case? Are we just going to kind of like take this really base approach to human beings that some of them are just like that? Or are we going to actually be like, well, if you were abused as a child, if you got too many concussions growing up, or if somebody talked to you in a way that never reaffirmed your self-esteem or allowed you to build up your self-confidence, then yeah, when somebody bumps into you on the subway, you're probably more likely to knock them the fuck out than the person who got good meals, who didn't get injured, who had people to take care of them and was talked to in a certain way. Like, it is poverty, but it's also just like living in conditions that are the best for human beings to survive and to thrive. And there's a lot of fatalistic thinking out there that condemns people that like that's just how you are. We can't do anything. And that's really easy. Now we have a cage for you. Now we have a force that comes to get you. And we don't have to think about why you did any of these things. We're just going to punish you. And so it is poverty, but it's a lot of things, some of which I think we haven't even studied yet because that money is going into a fucking police pension so that they can rain terror on the public and say that if you don't give us even more money and shake you down, things are going to be horrible. I swear to God, we just had a $20 million increase to the police budget this year, largest item in the budget in Toronto. And the police were literally like, like fucking like mob boss shit, like it's a nice city you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, Like it's like total mob shit. Like it's blackmail. And there's no other way to put it. It would be funny if it didn't have such dire consequences. But yeah, I don't know what else to say, man. Like we have we have perpetuated a set of realities that are fundamentally anti-human. And then we are surprised when people act in antisocial and anti-human kinds of ways. Like we gave the conditions for them to do that. And those conditions, poverty, violence, abuse, neglect, like not having somebody when you're growing up even telling you that you can make a difference, that you're worth something, that your ideas matter. All these things contribute to the world that then needs to be policed to within an inch of its life. So I will really stop there because I I'm there's a hockey game on that I think I should go watch.
No problem. Well, just before closing, actually, just before closing, let me ask you very quickly: you working on any projects? Any new book projects or?
Oh, thinking about book stuff, but there's nothing in the works at the moment. I'm sorry, I don't have anything to break on the show.
Okay.
I want everybody who is interested in my work to check out yeseverything.ca,
Mhm.
where I wrote recently about Umar Zamir, where I've been publishing a lot of stuff on the Palestine Solidarity movement in Canada. Yeah, Elle Jones publishes there from time to time. I'm trying very hard to get Elle to write more, but she's too important for me now, so it's hard. Um, but please check out my work at yeseverything.ca. Writing a book is a lot harder than just pumping out an article every now and again. So we'll see. We'll see when I find the stamina to go for number two.
Right. Well, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One, our all things. Yes, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One, our All Things Canada edition, our Make Me Wanna Holler, which covers the plight of Black people across Turtle Island, Britain, and elsewhere, and all things radical reform or abolishing the police. We were joined by Desmond Cole, Black Canadian leftist, journalist, social racial justice activist, and of course, an advocate of abolishing the police, and he is the author of "The Skin We're In," a year of Black resistance, right?
A year of Black resistance and power. That's correct.
And which is a book I am planning on getting for my birthday, which comes in July. So I'm looking forward to that.
You
well,
might get something in the mail from me.
well, Desmond, keep doing the great work you're doing, and of course, solidarity to the Palestine Justice Solidarity movement. And I wish you all the best of luck as you do these encampments and try to get your universities to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. And yeah, keep up with the great work you're doing. And yeah, of course, look forward to having you back on the program in the future. All right.
Thanks for inviting me back. Thanks for giving me all this time to say my shit. I really appreciate you, Yuri.